A long time ago, in the scenic village of Pinewood, where every street tells a story and every quilt holds a piece of history, there was a young woman named Rosie, who was the first daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They were the well-beloved quilting family of Pinewood. Rosie had two sisters, and they were very beautiful and good at quilting. But, unlike her sisters, no suitors were interested because of her body size. Rosie was known as the Fat Quilter, who stitches joy into the heart of her handmade quilts using bold colors, prints with high contrast, and improvisational piecing. The villagers would often comment and whisper that Rosie has an affectionate heart as big as her smile. Rosie, however, would often hide away as she felt everyone saw her as the fat quilter. She did not have any love interest because she was fat, and all the possible suitors in the village called her Fat Rosie. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were very troubled by their daughter's weight, and so they decided to give her her own quilting shop, hoping that the business will become extremely busy and Rosie would limit eating and snacking all day. Rosie turned her quilting shop into a haven of warmth and creativity for everyone in Pinewood. And as much as she would have customers, they would always mock her behind her back, and the issue of her weight was always on the lips of gossips. The villagers would say, "I heard she eats 2 whole chicken by herself, with a huge bowl of potatoes and rice." Others would say, "I heard she sleeps on the floor, and because she is so fat and heavy for her bed." Although her sisters were very beautiful and slender, their skills were not like Rosie's, and they too would gossip and laugh at her. Rosie's quilt were like no other. Each stitch she makes tells a story, using bold, lively fabrics that reflect her lively spirit. Her shop is a tapestry of life in Pinewood, welcoming all who enter with open arms, cups of teas, and cakes. Rosie was aware that no man wanted to marry her, and so she was happy to remain single and focus on her quilting. Because she was so addicted to food and could never see herself becoming slim in her lifetime. It was now the end of the year, and everyone from the neighboring towns came to Pinewood to hold the yearly festival of music, specialty foods, dancing, and an abundance of quilting display. And this year was no different. Villagers gathered to showcase their creations, but all eyes were on Rosie and her masterpiece. Amongst the crowd is David, a competitor from another town. He has heard of Rosie and her quilts, but never had the opportunity to meet with her. While at the festival, Rosie maintained her distance from the bustling of the crowd. At the corner of her eyes, she saw her favorite dessert stand and headed over to get a few donuts. From a distance, David saw Rosie and approached her. Rosie, with a forced smile, stepped back as he came closer, hiding her surprise as she was stunned by his confident demeanor. David has always admired Rosie from a distance, but was never confident enough to approach her. Like Rosie, he loved and enjoyed quilting. He had visited her shop on a few occasions, but always asked for support from the shop assistant. "I see you've outdone yourself again, Rosie," he says, trying to mask his emotions. Rosie's response was harsh and defensive. "What do you want? Are you trying to cause a gossip about my weight?" she said. "I was just saying hello," said David. "I saw your quilt and it's very beautiful." He turned to place his order. As they both waited in silence, the donuts was ready. Unknown to each other, they both ordered the same flavored donut. As their order arrived, they both smiled at the realization of this. This broke the tension. David continued to talk to Rosie and gestured for them to walk together. As they chatted, they were slowly becoming friends and felt a little relaxed with each other. They conversed about quilting and the love for the craft and what stimulated the desire to become quilters. They continued, and Rosie was intrigued by his kind nature and his stories about his quilting. As they wandered throughout the festival admiring the stalls, they came upon Esmeralda's stand, a peculiar woman, a fortune teller with eyes like deep pools of secrets. Esmeralda's tent was a place of wonders and whispers. David said, "Do you want to go in?" Many sought her for answers, but none left without a piece of their soul lingering in her smoky abode. Rosie was adrift with deep thoughts. David asked the question again. "Rosie, would you like to go in?" Rosie came back to reality and answered, "Sure, why not?" with an unsure smile. Esmeralda welcomed them both with a sly smile. "Come in there, Rosie," she purred. "Let us see what the stars have in store for you." Rosie laughed, a jolly sound like a merry bell, and took her seat, her round form spilling over the edges of the plush chair. As Esmeralda gazed into the crystal ball, a strange light flickered in her eyes. "I see a change," she murmured, "great and terrible change. You shall wake transform, and the world will see you differently." Rosie, the ever-skeptic, chuckled heartily. They eventually left Esmeralda's stall and continued the evening. They grew closer over the next 2 months and spent every day together making quilts and discussing patchwork ideas. That night, as Rosie slept, strange dreams filled her mind. Visions of a new self, light and swift. When she woke, her bed seemed larger, her quilt a grand sea in which she was adrift. Startled, she rushed to the mirror. Gone was the familiar plump face and body she had always known. Before her stood a slender stranger with sharp features and a cold, piercing gaze. Her heart pounding, Rosie dressed quickly, her once tight clothes now hanging loosely on her frame. She hurried to town, but something was different. The townsfolk, once warm and welcome, now turned their heads and whispered as she passed. Rosie was now beautiful and slender, and was dressed immaculately. Their whispers grew louder. "Is that really Rosie?" they asked. "What has become of her?" Her newfound beauty seemed to cast a shadow over her old life, turning friends into strangers and kindness into envy. Rosie, once full of warmth and cheer, now found herself cold and distant. Her sharp tongue and harsh words replaced the laughter that used to ring out from her quilting store. She became cold and distant from David, as she felt he was no longer in her league. She became a stranger, not only to the town, but to herself. Rosie would parade herself as though she was better than everyone and made fun of people, and she too was now a center of one who caused gossip. Rosie and David broke up. A year later, Rosie gained all her weight back, became Fat Rosie again. she settled in a relationship where she was not happy and married an old man. Esmeralda's prophecy had come true in a way no one could have imagined. Rosie had gained the slim figure she had always sought, but lost the essence that made her beloved. The moral of Rosie's stories is that we must be careful of what we wish for. For many times, the greatest change that we aspire to achieve has become our greatest loss. Rosie's story is a reminder that true beauty lies not in appearance, but in the warmth and kindness of one's heart. Being your true self will always be the best you can be, and love and every goal that you desire will eventually come your way. I hope this story resonates with you. Thank you for joining me on The Fat Quilter. Remember to like and subscribe and join for more stories that stitch fabric together in our lives. Bye for now. Happy quilting. Let me know your feedback in the description box. See you in the next one, guys. Love you loads.